It's 3 in the morning in New York. The year is 1964. A woman named Kitty Genovese is walking home when a stranger attacks her. She screams. Lights come on, windows open. And according to the story that would later spread around the world, 38 neighbors watched what was happening. None of them helped. By morning, Kitty was dead. And that story became famous for one disturbing reason. The people watching were not monsters. They were ordinary people. And under the right conditions, so are you. But there is a problem with that story. The number 38 came from a newspaper report published 2 weeks after Kitty died, and much of it was wrong. Most neighbors did not watch the entire attack. Many only heard shouting. Some could not see what was happening at all. One person shouted from a window, and someone did call the police. So the famous story of 38 people calmly watching a woman die never really happened that way. That should make the story less disturbing, but it doesn't, because when psychologists started studying why people fail to help strangers, they found something even stranger. You don't need 38 people. Sometimes you only need 2. For years, people blamed Kitty Genovese's death on New York. They said people in big cities had become cold. They simply didn't care anymore. And that explanation is comforting, because it lets you believe that you would have acted differently. You would have called the police, you would have gone outside, you would have helped. But 2 psychologists, John Darley and Latané, thought something else was happening. Maybe the problem wasn't the type of person watching. Maybe the situation itself was changing how people behaved. So they tested it. In one experiment, a student sat alone in a room. They were told they were speaking to other students through an intercom. Then, during the conversation, one of the voices suddenly sounded like he was having a seizure. He struggled to speak. He gasped for help. When the student believed they were the only person who could hear him, they usually went for help very quickly. Then the researchers changed one thing. They told the student that several other people were also listening. Suddenly, people became slower to help. Some did nothing. The emergency had not changed. The people had not changed. Well, the only difference was this. They believed someone else could help. When you are the only person who sees an emergency, the responsibility feels clear. If you don't act, nobody will. But when other people are around, that responsibility starts to spread out. You think someone else might call, someone else might step in, someone else probably knows what to do. Psychologists call this diffusion of responsibility. The more people who could act, the less responsible each person may feel. But crowds affect us in another way too. Imagine you are sitting alone in a waiting room. Smoke starts coming under the door. You would probably notice it immediately. You might stand up. You might leave. You might tell someone. Now imagine the same room is full of other people. Smoke starts coming in, but nobody else reacts. They keep sitting there calmly. Now you hesitate. You look at them. They don't seem worried. So maybe you think there isn't really a problem. But here's the strange part. They may be looking at you and thinking exactly the same thing. You look calm. So they stay calm. They look calm, so you stay calm. Nobody wants to be the first person to panic. And without saying a single word, an entire room can convince itself that nothing is wrong. Darley and Latané tested this too. When people were alone and saw smoke entering a room, they usually reported it quickly. But when other people in the room stayed calm, many waited much longer. Some stayed even as the room filled with smoke. And this doesn't only happen in experiments. Think about someone collapsed near a busy station. Hundreds of people may walk past. Each person sees everyone else continuing with their day, so they continue too. Or think about a fight in public. A crowd forms, phones come out, everyone is watching, but each person may still be waiting for somebody else to step forward. It doesn't mean people have lost the instinct to help. Sometimes the crowd simply makes it harder to decide that you should be the one to act. And that is what makes this uncomfortable. Because the same brain that tells you someone should do something can also quietly tell you someone else probably will. But there's another side to this. When researchers later studied hundreds of real public conflicts caught on camera, they found that people usually did step in. In most cases, someone helped. And surprisingly, larger crowds could actually make help more likely. Why? Because real emergencies are often much clearer than experiments. A real fight is obvious. A person collapsing in front of you can be obvious. There is less time to wonder whether something is actually wrong. And that tells us something important. The dangerous moment may not be after you know there is an emergency. It may be the few seconds before that. The moment when you are looking at everyone else and asking yourself, is this serious? Should I do something? Why isn't anyone else reacting? That hesitation is where the crowd has the most power. So if you are ever the person who needs help, there is something useful to remember. Don't just shout at everyone. Choose one person. Look directly at them. Point if you have to. And give them one clear job. You in the gray coat, call an ambulance. Now the responsibility is no longer floating around the crowd. It belongs to one person. And that makes it much harder to ignore. So the next time something happens in public, remember this. If everyone is waiting for someone else to move, sometimes all it takes is one person deciding not to wait. Which leaves you with one question. If something happened in front of you today, would you be the one who moved? Or would you look around first to see what everyone else was doing? Tell me below. And if this changed the way you look at the next crowd you stand in, subscribe. Because next time, we're opening a door most people spend their whole lives keeping shut.